Hello everybody, it's Colin Ellis here. Welcome to another culture and coffee podcast for Monday, the 20th of March, 2023. I've got to say, it's kind of nice. I feel like I haven't done a podcast, I've recorded a podcast at home for the longest time. It feels so good not to have all of the noise that comes associated with a coffee shop. It's good, right? Like, hopefully you get a sense of it. Where I am at any particular time, but also it can be noisy. I won't lie. It can be noisy. So it's nice to be in the peace and quiet of my own home, having made my own coffee here. I'm not worried about what's going on in the background. Anyway, I hope you had a lovely weekend. I'm going to talk today. I'm going to talk about what is culture. I realised when I was planning the podcast last week, I haven't actually done a podcast where I explain what culture is, and I think there's often an assumption made that we know what it is, and I've obviously made the same assumption, having never written a podcast about it. So I'm going to do that today. I want to give you some snippets of what I generally like to spend Sunday, particularly when I'm writing a book. I like to spend Sunday doing some research. What a great way to spend the weekend. So some interesting facts for you from the research this weekend, some of which will go in the new book, some of which most definitely won't. Did you know that the popularity of golf has soared for weekdays by 84%? So more people, 84% increase in golf during the week. What does that tell you about hybrid work? Yeah, that's that balance, right? I think one of the things that I was talking about recently is people are spreading their working days with hybrid work, which is still a privilege. 80% of the world's working population still can't work hybrid, so it's worth bearing that in mind. It's still a massive privilege. But I think, people have got what they would consider to be a greater balance. And yeah, I do feel that lots of people lack discipline. You may be one in actually kind of making it work because they're working all hours of the day, all hours of the night. There's a real lack of discipline. Anyway, that's just one stat I thought you'd be interested in. Lots of other things. There's one organisation, which is Citibank, who I read about the weekend. They don't do hybrid work, but the CEO has given employees the last 2 weeks, those that can work hybrid, the last 2 weeks of the year working from home in the run-up to Christmas. So I thought that was a good take. That's something slightly different, and I've long talked about the fact that it's an experiment, and so that was one good thing. There's a great piece from MIT Sloan, the top 5 working definitions of 2022, this is what I like this one: family ghosts. Fundamental attitudes and behaviours from early family dynamics that play out in the work environment. Yeah, I've brought my family ghosts to work once or twice when I was an employee, and definitely see it playing out today. Anyway, just thought you'd be interested in that. So, what am I drinking today? Well, I'm drinking a Colombian coffee. I know what you're thinking. A Colombian coffee, Colin. Another one. It's the second Colombian coffee in 3 podcasts. It doesn't come up for a year, and then it's twice in a month. So yes, I am drinking an Edilberto Vergara from Colombia, which is roasted by Maker Coffee in Melbourne. I don't know if you know this. Colombia is the 3rd highest producer of coffee in the world. Brazil is first, which probably comes as no surprise. Vietnam is second. I don't think I've ever done a Vietnam coffee. Well, I've had a Vietnamese coffee, which I love, and they love their sugar in the Vietnamese coffee. So I must try and get my hands on a Vietnamese coffee, and then it's Colombia. Of course, Colombia is more associated with drugs, unfortunately. It's the 4th largest drug trafficking country, 3rd largest coffee, fourth largest drug. But Colombia is much more than this. Obviously, it's associated with Carlos the Jackal and all of that, much more. And it's one of those countries that I haven't been to South America, and I really do need to get to South America. I'm really looking forward to getting there at some stage. So if any organisations, I can't do that. That's shameless. I'm not doing that. Yes. Yeah, Colombia. So mid 18th century, or the early 18th century, Colombia was documented as a coffee producing country. And what I like about Colombian coffee, it's not too heavy. I think with some of the African coffees, and if you're a listener to this podcast, you know I like the Ethiopian coffees, can be quite heavy, quite earthy. Definitely the Kenyan ones, really full, rich bodied. The Cumberland coffees are really, really easy to drink. Really easy to drink. And so Colombian coffee today. Yeah, why would I like to go to Colombia? Beaches, I suppose. Glaciers. It's got everything. Right? That salt cathedral. It's got a massive salt cathedral, which I think is underground. So yes, I'd love to go there. The coffee today it's got notes of cherry, grapefruit and cane sugar. It's the pink bourbon varietal. Let's have a taste. See, it's just so much lighter. That's so smooth. Cherry and cane sugar, definitely. I'm not getting any grapefruit, I have to say. But it's early in the morning, I suppose. I don't know. Do your taste buds take time to wake up? Maybe. I don't know. Right, let's get on to the coffee. Never really talked about culture, so let's talk about what it is. And I could talk about this for about 45 minutes, and regularly do. So let's see if I can do it in 20 minutes. Let's go with the genesis of working culture. Like, how is it built in the first place? We like I mentioned at the top, we take it for granted people know. And one of the things, I talk a lot to human resources professionals, as you would expect, and a lot of them don't know. And it's not that it's bad or wrong, it's just it needs to be understood if you're to create a good one, obviously. So working culture obviously has genesis in social culture. So the social culture in which you live plays a big, big part in your working culture. I mean, it's kind of an obvious thing to say. So, for example, if you work in Japan, the working culture is very different if you work in the UK. If you work in Australia, it's very different if you work in the US. And you might think, oh, yeah, it's obvious. Yeah, but is it? I mean, Japan, you can kind of understand, I think, that in the sense that there's very, very, very little immigration. I think 98% of the population is indigenous Japanese. Very, very little immigration. But you take a country like New Zealand, for example. New Zealand, certainly pre-pandemic anyway, lots and lots of immigration. And as a result, its culture is a sum of lots and lots of different cultures. I remember when we moved over in 2007, lots and lots of Brits, lots of Indians, just lots of different nationalities. Here in Melbourne, where I am at the minute, we've got a large Greek community, we've got a large Croatian community, a large Italian community just down the road in Lygon Street. It just lots and lots of different. So, cities, countries are made up of the different social cultures, but the culture generally is driven by the prevailing social culture. So, for example, here in Australia, the prevailing social culture is kind of social. And so things like highly social. So going for a beer after work is normal. Going for a beer during work. No, after work is kind of normal. Going down the beach, like after work, particularly in summer, is normal. We joke all the time. There are those very stereotypical shrimps on the barbie, but that's part of the social culture, right? It's quite laid back, I would say, the Australian social culture. Coming for someone coming from the UK, having a cup of tea. Like, a cup of tea is the answer to every single problem in Britain. Obviously. We don't really talk about our feelings in Britain, where we do in Australia. We talk about our feelings a lot. In the UK, we definitely don't talk about our feelings. We talk about the weather, if anything, as a way of letting you know how we feel. So, very, very different in the way that the social culture is made up. So that's the first element to working culture. The second element is obviously the people and their personalities. Different people from different backgrounds with different ideas and different personalities. And people are the ones that really drive and maintain the social culture. So social culture is the first element. Second element is people and their personality. Your social culture generally doesn't change. Every now and again, there'll be some kind of major event that happens. In Iran at the minute, there's somewhat of a revolution. And every 10 to 15 years, there's an inkling of something, but then the people really need to stick together in order to change the prevailing social culture. I got asked a question a couple of weeks ago. Can it be changed by things like earthquakes? At the time, we were talking about the earthquake in Turkey. Well, that can force political change if the government of the day are seen not to have done something that they shouldn't have done. But it really requires the people to kind of come together and demand something different. But the prevailing, social culture, it doesn't change too often. The US has undergone a bit of a change, I would say, in the last 6-7 years, and that's as a result of politics. Quite divisive now. Obviously, the UK with Brexit, it's quite different than it was. But different people, different personalities. So social culture is the first element. People and personalities are the second, because different people have got different ideas, different ways of processing information, and they're looking for different things from organizations. And so the third element of working culture is purpose, values that an organization puts out there. So what do organizations stand for? And of course, this changes over time. I'm quite candid about the fact that when I first started work in the late 1980s, no organization was talking about its purpose. Very few organizations were thinking about climate change, were thinking about sustainability. Very few were doing all of that. It was still about it was still about profit. Don't get me wrong. My first job was with a bank. It was all about profit. But kind of companies, what they stand for, what they project in the world, that's the third element. And people are attracted by what an organization stands for. And like I said, generationally, if organizations didn't move with the times, then, nobody would go and work for them, because they're like, we don't really like what we see. And over time, the social culture can demand something different of our organizations. So sustainability is a case in point. The social culture, pretty much says, listen, we have somewhat of a climate emergency. So what we expect of our organizations is for them to be responsible. We expect them to, where they can, reduce their carbon footprint. We expect them to think about ways in which they can, be more energy friendly, all of these kind of things. Also, I think, where there's a global movement around immorality of profit making, these kinds of things, the social culture demands something. I hope you're still with me. What I'm saying is that the prevailing social culture of the day expects something different of its organizations. My dad's generation, kind of the baby boomers, they were coming out of the war, particularly in the UK where I was brought up. What they demanded was prosperity. What they demanded was jobs. It was less about, does this organization really speak to the social culture of the day? Gee, they just come out of the war. War, there's an example. Is war was very much seen as a really, really bad thing, which it is today. Back then, it was seen as necessary to remain to retain global order. So all of these three things, so social culture, wherever you are in the world, people and personality, different ideas, different personalities, and purpose and value. So what organizations stand for, all of those three things converge in the middle. And from those three things, we're able to build a social culture. Now, if you're part of a global organization, that has to be understood at a very, very high level, because what you expect from your global organization is they put real thought, time, effort into educating people on those things. I'm doing 2 of these engagements right now with global organizations, which I absolutely love, where we take the time to make sure that everything that we, from an organization perspective, put out to our employees is about the purpose, the thing that we stand for. Make sure the mission is really clear, and make sure that our values are understood. Then we need to educate our managers globally on what culture is, because what we want is for them to build their own subculture within their own country. Remember, you can't just and I think many organizations make this mistake. They want to put out, because they want to tick all the culture boxes, and it's not a bad thing. You know, I have to applaud the effort. But if you go about it in the wrong way, all you do is confuse people. Each manager in each country has to create their own culture aligned to the purpose, values, mission of the global organization. Global organizations can't dictate behaviors because they differ country to country. What you don't want country to country is them creating their own values. You have to build something that's aligned to the global values, and everybody has to go about culture in a similar way. But the culture in each country is not going to be exactly the same. Now, when we do things like diversity and inclusion initiatives, which are, which really challenge biases, we have to recognize that the cultural mix is different country to country. So, take a country like Malaysia, which is a mix of 4 different social cultures, really. You've got British, Chinese, the prevailing Malayan culture. You've also got Singaporean. You've got all of these kind of cultures that all come together in Malaysia. Singapore is another great example of a country that is a mix of different social cultures, and each manager within each country has to do a similar thing. And then there are 6 elements. For those of you who listen to the podcast, there are 6 elements to working culture. So if the 3 elements to build working culture are social culture, people, personality, and then purpose, values, what the organization stands for, then it's only natural that purpose and values are at the core, purpose, values, vision are at the core of our working culture. Because they're the things that really then, kind of drive our decision making. So now we're coming down to a more micro level. If the macro level, how we build social culture, how we build working culture, then the micro level is the elements of culture. So at the heart of every great culture is vision and purpose. That's at the heart. And that's aligned to what the organization stands for. So you wouldn't create a different purpose, but you might create your own vision for your own country, but it's got to be aligned to what the organization's trying to do. Now, the way into any culture, of course, is through its people and through its personality. And this is all about relationship building. So once you're in the working culture, what are you doing to maintain those set of real, healthy working relationships where you can have empathy, where you can have compassion, where you can have healthy friction? These things are super important to make sure that we've got what we call cognitive dissonance, different ideas from different people. And so going back to that diversity and inclusion programs, what you want is an appreciation not only that everybody is different, that people are from different social backgrounds, and it's only through our difference that we have strength. Right? But we also then want to make sure that when we build our working culture, we have an appreciation of the different social cultures. Now, we'll do, for me, I see I see it on a small scale. I don't want to be critical because I think lots of organizations do lots of great things. We tend to focus a lot on gender diversity, which is crucially important because we're not even part of the way to solving that problem, actually, if you read some of the gender pay gap research that I do. But also what we want is cognitive diversity, and we want this appreciation that different people are from different backgrounds. And we make an assumption that when people, kind of work in a particular social culture, that they should conform to our social culture. It doesn't work like that. So we have things like Diwali and Chinese New Year and all of these good things. But we need to make sure that we do it for every culture. For every working culture within our working culture is how do we have an appreciation of that. Values, it's important that, and this is, I'm doing this work with a couple of organizations at the minute, is how do people put values into action. It's pointless having a set of values if you don't know actually how to put them into action. And this is, kind of then where you get down to the real nitty gritty day to day, kind of very, very human interactions. So the 6 pillars of workplace culture, I've already mentioned. Vision, purpose is one. Then you've got people and personality and communication, so how people talk to each other, that's 2. Third is values. How do we put values into action? 4th is then behavior. What do we expect of each other as human beings on a day-to-day basis? And you shouldn't really have to do this, but we do, because some people still don't know how to behave. But also it's about celebrating the behavior that we see. So any recognition and reward programs should be aligned to human behavior. Because any parent listening to this, you know, if you get good behavior from your child, you praise the behavior because you want more of the behavior. And so, you know, we learn this very, very early on as children. If we receive praise, we know to repeat the thing that we receive praise for. And the same is true of adults, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, it's just who we are as human beings. So, behavior. So things like recognition and reward fit into behavior. Things like performance management fit into behavior. To make sure, you know, things like pay and benefits all fit into behavior, because you might think, yeah, it's about technical ability. And of course it is to a degree about technical ability, but actually we want people to get remunerated for the behavior that they demonstrate, for the mindset that they have, for the attitude that they have. That's how we should be remunerating people. That's how we should be measuring people, based on those things. So that's the 4th element. The 5th element is collaboration. So how do we work together? So what processes do we have? You know, kind of what legislation do we have to conform to? How do we set our workspaces up? So hybrid working, when people talk about hybrid working, yeah, it demands a change in behavior, it demands a change in collaboration. It's only a small element of it, though, kind of where you're actually based. So how do you set your office up for success? How do you set your workplace up for success? Have you got the tools for people to be able to do the job? Not just technology, but assets. You know, if you run a small gardening business, for example, do you have all of the right tools? Is everything sharp so that your employees are able to do the things that they're able to do? You know, from a collaboration perspective, are you coming together to set expectations in the right way? If you're using technology, does everybody know how to use it? It's obvious, I know, but a lot of people still don't know how to use Microsoft Teams properly. People definitely don't know how to present using Microsoft Teams. Jeez, I've been on the receiving end of some rubbish presentations. Is it working? I'm sharing my screen. Can you see it? Do you not know? And then lastly, there's the last pillar of workplace culture is innovation. So how do we use data to make sure that we constantly evolve to meet the challenges of tomorrow? How do we make sure that it's safe to fail? Not that we should be trying to fail, but what we want to do is almost kind of, what we definitely want to do is encourage what we call entrepreneurship, people to take a bit of a punt on an idea and work on it. But most people aren't making time for creativity. Most people are stuck in this cycle of being too busy. Not that they're productive, they're just too busy because they're not very good at prioritizing, which generally fits into collaboration, by the way, understanding how to prioritize. So you've got these 6 elements of workplace culture that all sit at the heart of how culture is built, which is working culture. You almost, if you look at it as a circle, it always drops right into the middle there. So the social, just to sum up, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's made sense. You know, I'm going to, about an hour later, I'll be sat there with another cup of coffee thinking, did that really make sense? I don't do it very often, honestly, except after every podcast. So there's 3 elements to make working culture. Those 3 elements are social culture, where you are in the world, people and their personalities, different ideas from different humans, and what organizations stand for. And then workplace culture, there's 6 elements to that. There's lots of 3 of this and 6 of this. 6 elements to that, which is purpose and vision, personality and communication, values, behavior, collaboration, and innovation. And all of those things together, once we educate our managers, they then know what culture is, and then and only then can they go and build a really vibrant one. Hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Have a great day wherever you are. Ta-ra for now.